we have to unify the party if we're going to be at full strength to win in the fall, which is our goal, which I desperately want to see happen. And to pretend we're unified isn't going to put us at full strength to win in the fall. We have to actually unify. I believe between now and July, we will be able to figure out how to unify our party.
Speaker Paul Ryan to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel yesterday in those recorded comments. Paul Ryan went on to say that the grand old party needs to be at, quote, full strength. For more reaction and analysis, let's welcome in political commentator Michael Reagan. Michael is the author of a great new book. The title of the book, Lessons My Father Taught Me. And as always, you can find and follow Michael on Twitter. His handle @ReaganWorld. Michael, we really appreciate your time tonight on Newsmax Prime. And we talked about this last week since you are an active member of the Twitterverse. A lot of comments came in about this when you tweeted out, the Republican Party is no longer the party of Reagan. It is now the party of Trump. Good luck. Now, look, there's no doubting there's a difference in tone between Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, and we saw clear evidence of that over the weekend with Mr. Trump's attacks on Hillary, citing Bill Clinton and his conduct while in the Oval Office. In your mind, is that fair game?
I think it's a losing strategy, to be honest with you. We fought that war back in the 1990s, all the talk radio, everybody in the conservative movement was on top of that during the 1990s. It's an old story. And I don't think it's a winnable strategy. There's too many other issues to go after Hillary Clinton on that are now relevant to what's going on in the world today. Benghazi, the email situation, what's going on with the economy, what's going on with jobs. Those are things that people are looking at. They're not looking at what Bill Clinton did, when and where, and what the definition of is now in 2016. I think it's a losing strategy.
Well, let's turn to something that we all hope will be a winner, and that is your great new book. I had a chance to really start digging into it, and I want to congratulate you on what is a uniquely personal perspective and narrative that befits a son's relationship with his father. And we will invite callers if they want to talk politics, but also if they want to talk about your memories of your dad. And as I understand it, growing up, Michael, you write you were a member of the Beverly Hills Brat Club. How did your dad treat you differently than, say, Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, and other Hollywood stars treated their kids?
Well, you know, I found out about taxes when he said taxes were too high to give you an increase in your allowance. I was getting like $1 a week allowance from my father, and the Hope kids were getting more, and the Crosby kids were getting more, whatever. We were all going to school together. We were all playing together. Yeah, I was a Beverly Hills brat, but, you know, I was proud of it. I was born and raised there. I grew up at the Beverly Hills Hotel. My mother, Jane Wyman, you know, she was something also. This is the woman who said, listen, yeah, I know all the other kids are getting a brand new bike and their parents are giving it to them, but you're going to have to get a job if you want to get a bike from me and sign a note to owe me the money that I'm going to loan you for that new bike. And so this is the way I was raised. I think that was probably because of their values that they had coming from the Midwest part of this country, St. Joe, Missouri for my mom, and of course, Illinois, you know, for my father. But I think what people will find out in this book is that whatever you thought about Ronald Reagan as a politician, you say, oh, was he this, was he that, what a great guy was there. This rubber stamps really the Ronald Reagan you thought you knew. And it tells it from a son's perspective, you know, what I learned from my father. And by the way, still learning from my father, J.D., as I look back, you know, all these years, the lessons he tried to teach me where I was too young to understand then, I now look back. For instance, in the book, I talk about my father and Nancy, that relationship, why it was, I believe, the way it was, why Patty and Ron are liberal, why they are and the way it is from my perspective. And I think it's very interesting when you look at it from that view.
Well, you know what's interesting to our callers, and it is the fact that you come on, Michael, to talk about your life with your dad and in the Reagan family, and also talk about your dad as a great historic figure. In fact, from the Queen City of the West, one of my favorite towns, Cincinnati, Ohio, Jacob is on the line right now. Jacob, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Oh, thanks.
And what's on your mind?
Well, I have a question for Michael. I mean, it's a political question, unfortunately, but regarding Trump, what's actually going to do more harm to the conservative movement? Him losing to Hillary, her becoming president, or Trump actually winning and governing as a liberal?
What about that?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, Donald Trump is not a conservative. So, the conservative, you're finding out now within the Republican Party, there is a group within the Republican Party that is a conservative group. But remember, it's a big tent. And so there's others in there that are moderate. There's liberals, there's hawks, there's doves, there's, anti-tax, there's pro-tax, there's pro-life, there's pro-choice. And so when you have a big tent like that, you're going to have to get to the whole tent if you want to go forward and win a general election. And so this is what he's got to do. He's got to grab people like me and bring me in. He's got to bring people like Paul Ryan, who he's going to meet with on Thursday. He's got to bring those people in. And how is he going to do that to bring us on board to show up on Election Day? Because if we don't, Hillary Clinton is the president of the United States.
Well, let me ask Jacob a question. Jacob, we know you have the right to a secret ballot, but where do you sit right now? Are you going to vote for Trump, or are you still trying to evaluate what's going on?
Oh, there's no way I'm voting for Trump. Absolutely no way.
Well, you going to vote for Hillary?
Not going to vote for Hillary either. I'm left with two horrible options.
All right. Well, we sure appreciate the call tonight, Jacob. Let me just, we just heard Jacob there. Let's nail this down a little bit more, Michael, because hearing in your answer, I thought you were quoted earlier this week as saying you couldn't vote for Trump, but are you persuadable?
No, right now, no, I couldn't vote for Trump. I'm certainly not going to vote for Hillary Rodham Clinton. I'll vote down ballot. But Donald Trump's going to have to do something. I do not appreciate the fact of what he said about a true war hero, John McCain. I don't appreciate that at all. And he's not willing to take anything back at all. I'm going to be in Normandy next, Wednesday and Thursday. I'm going to be there with D-Day vets. And that's who I'm going to be with. And I look at those heroes that saved the world back on D-Day and back during the Second World War. I look at the heroes of Vietnam. And my father, how he met John McCain? My father was the first man to open up a door in the United States, in California, invited John McCain in and the other POWs into his home, our home, if you will, in Pacific Palisades, and met those people. So there are things that Donald Trump has said and done that you just have to take back. And if you don't take back, you're going to have a world of trouble.
I want to nail this down, because really, and we want to talk more about the book. So an affront to John McCain is enough to satisfy you, to, even though you're not going to vote for Hillary, you're going to be at peace with having Hillary Rodham Clinton in the White House. Forgive me, but that almost sounds like when McCain in 2008 was upset because Bill Cunningham used Mr. Obama's full name, Barack Hussein Obama.
I think there's a big difference between that, like a John McCain, and calling a war hero, saying the things he said about a war hero. Well, no, there's other things, the demeaning way he's treated everybody, the other 16, the way he's treated them. Everybody. And I said this on Twitter. Somebody said, well, your father and Donald Trump, they're so much alike. I said, if they'd been so much alike, Nancy never would have married Ronald Reagan. And that's a fact. I don't like the demeaning way that he's treated people all the way through the process. I think it's wrong, wrong, wrong. And I don't know. I look at that, and remember, I speak to world leaders too. I mean, I don't know if you do, but I certainly can talk to world leaders. And I have over my life, because of who I am and what I am. And the reality is, is he going to treat other world leaders the way he's treating those 16? And that scares the hell out of me.
So, through the lens of your association with world leaders, through an outspokenness that at times appears to be rudeness, but certainly is not politically correct, that is the crucible that will keep you from voting for Donald Trump. We've got about 20 seconds for your response before we go to the break.
At this point in time, so he's got to convince me, he's got to convince Paul Ryan, he's got to convince a lot of people that he's going to be able to do that kind of a job and not be demeaning in the way that he's getting it done. He's got to be presidential. And today, he's just a salesman.
All right. Well, we know that Ronald Reagan said attitude is everything. And Michael Reagan, we're going to talk more about your great new book and take more of your phone calls from throughout the United States as Newsmax Prime continues here from Newsmax TV.
Well, The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Ronald Reagan in 1964. The name of the speech, A Time for Choosing. Ronald Reagan speaking out in favor of Republican nominee Barry Goldwater in that year. We're pleased to continue our conversation with political commentator and author Michael Reagan. Michael's new book is entitled Lessons My Father Taught Me: The Strength, Integrity, and Faith of Ronald Reagan. And you can also find and follow Michael on Twitter at Reagan World. Michael, the phones are ringing here, as you might imagine, and a dear lady has called from a wonderful corner of the country up in Murphy, North Carolina, up there in the mountains. Joanne, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing great.
I liked President Reagan. I thought he was a very nice gentleman. I respected him in a lot of ways, but I started out rooting for Cruz because he fought against Obamacare, and that gained my respect. But as time went on, I found that Trump is saying what everybody's thinking, and he's telling it like it is. People are so sick of everything being sugar-coated that when they get hit in the pocket, they wonder where it came from because everything was seen through rose-colored glasses. We need the truth. The politicians need to get off their high horse and start working for the people. We want to see jobs. Where I live, NAFTA has come in. We lost a lot of companies out of this corner of the world, and we struggle over here.
I know
we
it.
Need jobs
I'm a native North Carolinian. Joanne, I just want to ask you one other thing, Joanne. Political correctness. Is that what, in terms of the atmosphere out there, is that what you're fed up with as well?
Yes.
All right.
People in the White House, people in the seats that we voted them into were supposed to be representing us, and they're not. They're paying attention to what each other thinks instead of what the people voted them in for.
Well, let's get Michael in on the conversation. Michael, you hear Joanne. Your take on what she has to say.
Listen, I was telling somebody over the weekend, we were talking about this, they said, all you're hearing from Donald Trump is the same thing J.D. Hayworth said when he was doing talk radio, Mike Reagan said when he was doing talk radio, and what all the other radio talk show hosts have been saying for the last 20 years. And what Donald Trump was is raise it up a level by running for president of the United States and say the same things that we, in fact, were talking about. We've been talking about immigration for how long, JD? We've been talking about China for how long, JD? We've been talking about this stuff for so long, and it's like Donald Trump's been listening to talk radio and took it, expanded it, and went viral with it. And these are all the people who listen to talk radio are getting behind him. He has energized them to follow him and vote for him in the primaries. But in order to win, you got to spread it out and bring more people to the party to win a general election. You can't just win with 16 million people. You can in a primary, but you're going to need a lot more than that to win in a general election.
Well, let's talk about someone who you know very well, who did quite well in general elections, your dad, Ronald Reagan. I understand that your dad had a very intense work ethic, yet he used to just kind of portray a guy who it all came easy to. He hid that intense work ethic from the public, did he not? And why did he do that?
Yeah, he didn't do it on purpose. He just that's just the human being, the person that he was. You know, when you walked into his library and you looked at the books on the shelf, they weren't there for video and cameras. He actually read all those books on his shelf, and he read them more than once. He was a reader, and readers are leaders, and he was a leader because he was a reader. Truly, we don't read anymore. We text, we email, we do all this stuff, but do we really go out and do we really read? And he did. And he wrote his own speeches, and he showed my sister Maureen and myself. We used to take us out to the ranch, and we did our chores at the ranch and what have you on any given Saturday. You know, the great thing about my dad is, you know, we have 20 million kids who go to bed at night without a father in the home. My father divorced my mother divorced my father, I should say, you know, when I was 3-4 years old. And my dad never, ever forgot that he had another family other than the new family he put together with Nancy. And that meant so much to my sister Maureen and I. to really move forward. And he taught me so much in that way. There's a letter in that book, the letter he wrote me on the occasion of me getting married. It's a phenomenal letter. He was a writer. Today, what do? We text or email. Who writes letters today? But
Yeah, well, it's
book.
fun. It's interesting because you mentioned that, and I remember seeing a letter your dad wrote to a voter at a Holiday Inn in New Hampshire about tax policy. And he sat down between events and wrote this guy this incredible missive. But you were talking about family a second ago, Michael, and I want to touch on this because those of us involved in public life, whether it's politics, broadcasting, or whatever, there's a lament about time with the kids. You talked about your circumstances, but for Ron Jr. and Patty, was he concerned about a lack of time with them, or how did he address his parenting of your two younger siblings with you?
I say in the book, Maureen and I were lucky enough. We spent 24 years with our father, going out to the ranch and doing things with him before he got into politics. Ron was 8 years old when Dad became governor. Patty, I think, was like 13 or 14 when he became governor. And he wasn't able to give the time to them, that he gave to Maureen and I. And, I really believe the way they saw it is politics and Christianity really took their father away from them. And so the time they could have spent with their dad, he had to be out on a campaign trail. And when he was home, he was with them, just swimming and doing the things he could. But they didn't get that kind of time with him that, in fact, Maureen and I got with our father. And it's so important for a father to spend time. And, of course, Nancy wasn't going to give up much time either. And I talk about that in the book. So there was that competition between Ron and Patty, politics, and Nancy. And unfortunately, so often the kids lose out.
When you were eulogizing your dad right before his burial, you gave a remarkable Christian witness, and you spoke very personally about how your dad shared the gospel with you. Is that the lasting lesson of your time with your dad?
Yeah, I mean, here's my dad. We're flying back on Air One, Easter week, Good Friday, 1988, and he counts out the number 9 on his fingers. And I said, "What's special about number 9? 9 more months, I'll no longer be president of the United States." I said, "Well, what's important about that to you?" He says, "In 9 more months, I'll be able to go to church every Sunday," which I have not been able to go to since I looked out that window of that car who sped away with men laying in blood that was meant for me. And I'm so worried about putting people in harm's way. I haven't gone to church to be able to honor my Lord and my Savior. And I'm looking forward to 9 months from now, I'm once again going to be able to do that on a regular basis. And it really meant so much to me that here was the President of the United States with all that he had to do and all the things he was trying to accomplish, was thinking about that last day in office and what he could do the next day when he was finally free again. And what he was going to do was start going back to church.
About a minute left, Michael, because you mentioned that your dad mentioned the assassination attempt. Mm-hmm. In about a minute's time, what did he tell you about that experience?
The thing is, I learned from that to forgive. And I'm just learning about forgiveness. Trust me, I'm just learning about it. But he taught me to forgive. Here's a man who was shot, had a great sense of humor, told me if I'm ever going to get shot, don't be wearing a new suit, because he wore a new suit that day and they cut it off him and threw him in the corner of the hospital. So he said, don't do that. And he hoped and prayed that John Hinckley's family would buy him a new suit to replace the one that was ruined by their son shooting him. But you know something? The end of the day, before he went back to the White House to go to work for this nation and the world, he asked God's forgiveness for John Hinckley for trying to kill him. And a few months later, Pope John Paul would be shot, and he would ask forgiveness from the man who tried to kill him. And those two warriors would get together, and they would change the world. And it all started by honoring God and asking God to forgive the people who tried to kill him.
Michael Reagan, we appreciate your time, and I will tell those watching us they'll appreciate your new book, Lessons My Father Taught Me, The Strength, Integrity, and Faith of Ronald Reagan. Our thanks to Michael Reagan, and when we come back, an update on the primaries and a final word as we continue.